So I have always really liked the Bowers And Wilkins PX7s. I really feel that the PX7s have a really incredible instrument separation, and I've always really liked their unique design. However, I could never really wear the PX7s for an extended period of time because they were never big hit approved. But now we have the Bowers And Wilkins PX7 S2s, and these things have been completely redesigned. They fit better and they feel better, but they don't really perform any better. Regarding pricing, the PX7 S2s have a retail price of $400, the same as the PX7s when they first came out. Now, Bowers and Wilkins says that the PX7s aren't going anywhere and that they will be getting a price reduction. But right now, I don't know how much the PX7s will be selling for because they're still listed for $400 on Bowers and Wilkinson's site. Nonetheless, if you want to pick either of these two headphones up, they'll be linked down below, or you can press on the YouTube shopping button. Give it a try. And if you want to further support the channel, check out the merch shelf down below. I've made some shirts and hoodies that look and feel great. And if you've been watching me for a while, you know I can be very particular. So I'll only set my name on something that I'm really proud of. Now first let's talk about this case. The PX7 S2s come included with a very hard shell case. This is perhaps one of the hardest cases out there, because the cases that come included with Sony's headphones or Bose's headphones just aren't as stiff, or they simply compress way more than either of Bowers and Wilkins's cases. Now size-wise, the PX7 S2's case is decently small. It's a little larger than your Bose QC45 case and Sony 1000XM4's case, but it's not huge like the Sony 1000XM5's case, which is a noticeable inconvenience if you have these headphones in your carry-on. However, one noticeable difference between this case and the PX7's case is that it is a little thinner, because the PX7 S2's case doesn't have that hump that's found on the PX7's case. Overall, the PX7 S2s come included with a very high quality, hard, and decently small case that's decent for traveling. But now let's talk about the headphones themselves. The major differentiating factor between the PX7 S2s and PX7s all comes down to their design and build quality. The PX7 S2s have a completely different body from the PX7s. Now, initially, I didn't like the PX7 S2's new body, but after getting to know them, I prefer this design over the PX7s. Now, at first glance, these headphones look very similar to one another. They both have fabric touch surfaces on both the ear cups and headband. Both of their headbands smoothly glide in and out, and we've got leatherette underneath the headband and on the ear pads. However, the quality and feel of the fabric and leatherette found on the PX7 S2s just feels better. The fabric on the PX7 S2s feels smoother and finer, almost like it has a higher thread count than the PX7s, and the leatherette on the PX7 S2s also feels more supple. It has a better grain to it, and it feels more natural than the leatherette found on the PX7s. Overall, I have to express how much more premium and refined these headphones feel in your hands than the PX7s. Also, it doesn't hurt that the ear cups on the PX7 S2s now fully swivel from one side to another, whereas the ear cups on the PX7s can only be laid down flat in one direction, but they don't fully lay flat in the other direction. But another cosmetic change found on the PX7 S2s that I really like is that they changed the button layout on these headphones. The S2s now have 3 distinctly separated buttons, and the center one is textured, so it's very easy to orient yourself. Whereas the buttons on the PX7s are super close together, so telling these buttons apart can be very hard. And the final major cosmetic change found on the S2s that I really like is that their headband is much more low profile when compared to the headband found on the PX7s. The headband on the PX7s is very bulbous. Yeah, it's thin, but when you wear these headphones, it looks like you have a helmet on. Whereas the headband on the S2s, not so much. But then there are the physical changes on the S2s that really help these headphones fit a lot more comfortably than the PX7s. For starters, the S2s don't fit as tight as the PX7s. Now, the PX7 S2s still have a snug fit to them, and they fit more snug than your Bose QC45, Bose NC700, Sony 1000XM4s, and Sony 1000XM5s. But I would still say that they are big head approved, because I can wear these these headphones for multiple hours on end without any problems, which is something that I can't say about the PX7s. But also, the headband on the S2s is a little different from the headband found on the PX7s. The headband on the S2s is a little wider than the headband on the PX7s. Plus, the headband on the S2s has a little more padding than the headband on the PX7s. So the headband on the S2s does a much better job of spreading out the weight of these headphones, and it also doesn't create a hot spot on the top of your head, like the headband on the PX7s can after you've been wearing them for like an hour or more. The only cosmetic change on the S2s that I feel is a little bit of a downgrade from the PX7s or the earpads. Now, the earpads on the S2s are decently spacious and they should be able to accommodate most ear types. However, the earpads on the PX7s are a little more spacious. And since the earpads on the PX7s have a little less surface area coming in contact with your skin, these earpads stay cooler for a little longer than the earpads on the S2s. Now, I'm not saying that the S2s have an overheating problem, but the PX7s do feel a little more breathable. But finally, let's discuss the weight of these headphones. Now, the PX7s weigh in at 310 grams. Now, they're not super heavy like the AirPod Max, which weigh in at 384 grams, which is a lot. But they are noticeably heavier than the Bose NC700s, which weigh in at 274 grams, the Sony 1000XM4s, which weigh in at 254 grams, the Sony 1000XM5s, which weigh in at 250 grams, and the Bose QC45s, which weigh in at 234 grams. Now, technically, the PX7 S2s have gotten a weight reduction because they weigh in at 307 grams. But honestly, the weight reduction here is negligible. With the PX7 S2s, these are a pair of headphones that you never really forget that you're wearing when you're sitting down at your desk working, and you're going to notice them shifting around while you're walking around with them on. But due to their more premium build and material, I think that's okay. Overall, I like the new body on the PX7 S2s. They fit better and they feel more premium than their predecessors. But now let's talk about tech specs. Regarding battery life, the S2s have an advertised battery life of 30 hours with the active noise cancellation turned on, just like with the PX7s. And if you were to use these headphones with the active noise cancellation turned off, then you'll be able to extend their battery life that way. Now, personally, I'm not really upset that the S2s didn't get a battery life upgrade from the PX7s, because both of these headphones do have above average battery lives. Now, when it comes to charging these headphones, the PX7 S2s charge via a USB-C port, as they should. However, the S2s do have a slightly better fast charging than the PX7s. If you were to charge the S2s for 15 minutes from a dead battery, they're going to get you a 7-hour charge. Whereas with the PX7s, they're going to get you 5 hours of playback time with that same 15-minute charge. Now, when it comes to Bluetooth connectivity, the S2s are using Bluetooth 5.2, which is an upgrade over the PX7s because the PX7s are using Bluetooth 5.0. But more importantly, with both of these headphones, they can be connected to 2 devices at the same time, which is good if you're a power user. And when it comes to overall performance, both of these headphones have zero latency across the board when watching movies or videos on your phone, whether you're using an iPhone or an Android device. And when it comes to audio codecs, both the PX7 S2s and PXs have support for SBC and AAC, which is very standard, but they also both have support for aptX, aptX HD, and aptX Adaptive. However, if you do want to take advantage of aptX, then you do have to be an Android user because iPhones top out at AAC. Regardless, these headphones are still going to sound great even if you're using them with AAC. But if you want to, you can always use the PX7 S2s with a wired connection. Now, the S2s don't have an audio jack like the PX7s do, but you can use their USB-C port as a wired connection. Now, you can either use their included USB-C to USB-C cable, or you can use their USB-C to audio jack cable if you want to use your standard 3.5mm audio jack that you'll either find on any AV equipment that you might have lying around the house, or if you want to plug these headphones into an airplane's entertainment console. My only critique here is that I don't like that the USB-C port on these headphones is angled back a little bit, because it can feel a little awkward when you have these headphones on with a wired connection. Personally, I just wish that this USB-C port would be pushed forward a little bit. But now let's talk about actually listening to music with these headphones. First off, I do have to point out that there are some changes here when it comes to sound. The S2s are now using 40mm drivers, whereas the PX7s are using 43mm drivers. Nonetheless, both of these headphones have the same great instrument separation that has really helped Bowers and Wilkins stand out from your Bose or Sony headphones. However, I can't help but notice that the PX7s sound a little brighter than the S2s. The vocals are a little more pronounced on the PX7s than on the S2s, whereas with the S2s, they sound a little more balanced. However, another major change between these two headphones is that with the S2s, you can now adjust the treble and bass on these headphones, whereas with the PX7s, you're stuck with what you've got. Now, overall, I think the PX7s sound great just the way they are, but it is nice that you can crank up the bass on the S2s and physically feel your bass. But nonetheless, both of these headphones are meant for people who like a more neutral or vocals focused sound signature. The bass on the PX7s does not physically rattle your head like the bass on the AirPod Max or Sennheiser Momentum 3s. The bass on the PX7s is strictly on the audible side. And even though you can adjust the bass on the S2s, and these headphones will rattle your head somewhat, even if the bass on these headphones is maxed out, these are suited for someone who likes a more neutral EQ. Now, simply put, yes, both of Bowers and Wilkins headphones have better instrument separation than the Bose QC45 and Bose NC700s, and they have far better instrument separation than your Sony XM4s and Sony XM5s. However, I still maintain that the AirPod Max and Sennheiser Momentum 3s have better instrument separation than the PX7 S2s. Plus, combined with the fact that both the AirPod Max and Sennheiser Momentum 3s can physically rattle your head a good amount if you want them to, I feel that the PX7 S2s aren't as flexible as the AirPod Max or Momentum 3s. The PX7 S2s are mainly geared towards someone who likes a neutral EQ, but if your taste changes, then the PX7 S2s will have a hard time adapting to you. But these headphones will have a better time adapting to you than the PX7s. And finally, there's the effect that active noise cancellation has on the overall sound quality of these headphones. With the PX7s, ANC really affects how these headphones sound. With their ANC turned on, the PX7s get a little narrow and their bass won't hit as hard. Now, with the S2s, they don't get as narrow if you have their ANC turned on, but their bass won't hit as hard. Overall, if you want the best sound quality out of these headphones, you want to use them with their ANC turned off. And my critique of how these headphones sound was with their ANC turned off. Now, when it comes to controlling your music, like I mentioned earlier, the PX7 S2s are using physical buttons, and this alone could be a deciding factor for some people. And like I mentioned earlier, I prefer the layout of these buttons over the layout of the PX7's buttons because they're much easier to tell apart. However, these headphones do have aware sensors, so they will automatically pause the music when you take them off. And then when you put them back on, they'll start playing music again. Now, personally, I'm not the biggest fan of these wear sensors for two key reasons. Now, first off, like you may have just seen, these wear sensors did take forever to actually pause my music when I took them off, because if we were to compare the wear sensors on these headphones, the wear sensors on, let's say, Sony's headphones or Sennheiser's headphones or the AirPod Max, they're a lot faster to react. But also, I don't like the wear sensors on these headphones because they will randomly pause my music even if you're sitting still. Now, I've already tried using the different sensitivity levels for these wear sensors and I'm still having this issue even when the wear sensors on these headphones are set to low. Now, personally, I'm not really shocked that the PX7 S2s are having this issue because the PX7s also had this issue when they first came out, and so did the original PXs. However, Bowers and Wilkins was able to fix that issue through a firmware update. So I do have hope that Bowers and Wilkins will also fix that issue on the S2s through a future firmware update. But personally, I am a little upset that Bowers and Wilkins is still having this issue because this is now the third time that this happens. I mean, like, Bowers and Wilkins, you guys really got to tighten up here a little bit. But now let's talk about the active noise cancellation on these headphones. Unfortunately, the ANC on the PX7 S2s has been downgraded from the PX7s. Now, the PX7 S2s block out a decent amount of noise for a pair of premium ANC headphones, but they simply aren't blocking out as much noise as their predecessors. So, like you may have just seen, both the PX7s and PX7 S2s block out a decent amount of noise for a pair of premium ANC headphones. But neither of these two headphones block out nearly as much noise as the Sony 1000 XM5s, which are currently the top dog when it comes to ANC. And like I mentioned earlier, the S2s are blocking out a little less noise than their predecessors. Now, the difference in performance isn't huge, and the ANC on the S2s does have a little less carbon pressure than the PX7s, but after almost 3 years, you would expect that Bowers and Wilkins would have better performing ANC than this. Overall, the ANC on the PX7 S2s can help if you plan on traveling with these headphones, but you definitely shouldn't pick them up if ANC is your main priority or super important to you. But then there's their ambient mode. Now, both of these headphones have an ambient mode, and the ambient mode on these headphones sounds very good. However, there are two key differences here. With the PX7s, you can adjust their ambient mode to your liking. Now, if you have their ambient mode set to 50%, it sounds just like the ambient mode on the PX7 S2s. But if you raise their ambient mode past 50%, that's when they start to sound a little artificial. Overall, I think the ambient mode on the S2s sounds fine. But the most important thing here is that the microphone array on the S2s does a much better job of rejecting wind noise than the microphone array found on the PX7s. And this improved microphone array on the S2s also helps them with their ANC, because you're not going to hear as much wind noise either. Now, even though I'm glad to see that the microphone array on the S2s has been improved, I still feel that Bowers and Wilkins should have added a conversation feature on the S2s, because this is a rather standard feature these days and is super useful for when you're traveling, and it works a little like this. So, like you may have just seen, with the NC700s, I can quickly lower the volume of my music and pump in all of the ambient sound around me so that I can quickly talk to someone without having to take my headphones off. And when I'm done with my quick conversation, my headphones will go back to normal at the press of a button. I really feel that Bowers and Wilkins should have added this feature to the S2s because it was sorely missing on the PX7s. And finally, here's the microphone test. And simply put, this is an area where Bowers and Wilkins really improved with the S2s because the microphone on the PX7s is just unusable. Whereas the microphone on the Bowers and Wilkins PX7's S2s sounds much better. My voice sounds much clearer here. But where this microphone really shines is when it comes to blocking out road noise, because right now this microphone is doing a really good job of blocking out this road noise and my voice is front and center. Because for comparison's sake, if we were to switch over to my lapel microphone, you're going to clearly hear all of this road noise. But if we were to switch back over to the Bowers and Wilkins PX7 S2s, it is severely reduced. Whereas with the PX7s, this microphone isn't doing much to block out any of this road noise and my voice sounds super shallow. And the same thing can be said when it comes to blocking out chatter. This microphone really isn't doing much to block out any of this chatter and my voice still sounds super shallow. Whereas with the PX7 S2s, this microphone is doing a much better job of blocking out this chatter and my voice is front and center. Overall, I think Bowers and Wilkins did a really good job on improving the microphone on the PX7 S2s for phone calls, and you can definitely get away with some noise pollution with these headphones. Now, the microphone on these headphones isn't the best one out there, but it is pretty good. But with all that being said, I think the Bowers and Wilkins PX7 S2s are a decent pair of headphones that look great and they are very well built. This upgrade from the PX7s was mostly cosmetic and some minor refinements. Personally, I really like the new design of the PX7 S2s because they fit better, they feel better, and they look better. That lower profile headband really makes a huge difference. I also like that the PX7 S2s have an improved microphone array that helps reduce wind noise either when you're letting in ambient noise or blocking out noise. They also have a much better sounding microphone for phone calls, and I like that you can now raise the bass on these headphones so they can get some physicality out of them. However, these headphones are only going to be able to please people who really appreciate instrument separation. And technically, the PX7 S2s are blocking out less noise than the PX7s. If you made it this far, I guess you enjoyed the video, so hit the like button and get subscribed. If you want to pick any of the products up, they'll be linked down below. And if you want to further support the channel, check out the merch. I made some shirts and hoodies that look and feel great. And you know I can be very particular, so I'll only slap my name on something if I'm really proud of it.